The Garden was not just loud tonight, it felt like the walls were closing in on Cleveland. This was the kind of playoff game where every possession carried weight, every missed free throw felt heavier than the last, and every loose ball seemed to decide who truly wanted control of this series. The Cavaliers came into Game 2 with one mission: erase the pain of that Game 1 collapse and prove they still had the strength, discipline, and star power to fight back. And early on, they looked ready. Evan Mobley came out aggressive, stepping into rhythm jumpers, attacking mismatches, and giving Cleveland exactly the kind of confident start they needed. Jarrett Allen was everywhere on the glass, fighting for second chances, protecting the paint, and giving the Cavs a physical presence inside. Donovan Mitchell, as always, carried that quiet storm in his game, patient one moment, explosive the next, waiting for the right time to strike. But New York never panicked. That was the difference. The Knicks absorbed Cleveland's first punch, then started slowly turning the game into their kind of battle. OG Anunoby brought pressure on defense. Karl-Anthony Towns stretched the floor and forced the Cavaliers' bigs to make difficult choices. Jalen Brunson did not need to dominate the scoring column early, because his control of pace, spacing, and matchups kept Cleveland guessing. Then Josh Hart changed everything. Hart played like a man possessed by the moment. He crashed the boards, pushed the tempo, attacked the rim, and when Cleveland dared him to shoot, he made them pay. Every three-pointer from Hart felt like gasoline thrown onto an already burning Madison Square Garden crowd. He was not just making shots, he was stealing Cleveland's confidence, one possession at a time. The Cavaliers had answers, but not enough of them. Mitchell kept fighting. Harden hit timely buckets. Mobley showed flashes of becoming the most dangerous two-way player on the floor, but missed free throws, empty bench minutes, and defensive hesitation gave New York all the oxygen it needed. This was not just a Knicks win, this was a message. New York showed that their strength is not only in Brunson's scoring, it is in their balance, their toughness, their trust, and their ability to turn role players into playoff weapons. Now tell me, where are you watching from? If you believe the Knicks are taking full control of this series, press 1. If you believe Cleveland still has a comeback coming, press 2. And if you want more deep NBA playoff breakdowns like this, subscribe to the channel, because this series is only getting more dangerous. Cleveland's biggest problem was not that they started badly. In fact, they started with purpose. The problem was that New York slowly forced them into a game of decisions, and the Cavaliers did not make enough of the right ones under pressure. In the opening stretch, the Cavs leaned into their size. Mobley found open space because Towns gave him room, and he punished it. Allen attacked the offensive glass like every rebound was a personal challenge. Mitchell picked his spots, using his burst to get downhill and his balance to create space when the defense backed up. For a moment, Cleveland looked like the team that had learned from Game 1. But playoff basketball is not only about your first adjustment, it is about the adjustment after the adjustment. New York began reading Cleveland's defense with more patience. Brunson was not forcing the issue. That mattered. Instead of trying to win the game with early hero shots, he pulled defenders toward him and trusted the pass. When Cleveland sent help, the ball moved. When they stayed home, Brunson attacked the gap. When they switched, New York hunted the matchup they wanted. That is how the Knicks created rhythm without needing everything to come from one player. Towns gave them spacing. Anunoby gave them defensive pressure and timely shooting. Bridges gave them calm scoring in uncomfortable moments. Hart gave them chaos, energy, and emotional control. Each player filled a different need, and that made New York harder to solve. For Cleveland, the warning signs started showing in the details. Their shooters missed clean looks. Their bench could not consistently punish New York's second unit. Their free throws became a quiet disaster, and every time the Cavaliers missed a chance to settle the game, Madison Square Garden became louder, heavier, and more hostile. That is what makes the Knicks dangerous in this kind of series. They do not always beat you with perfect basketball. Sometimes they beat you by making the game feel exhausting. They turn rebounds into momentum. They turn defensive stops into crowd explosions. They turn one missed Cleveland free throw into a psychological event. Mitchell kept Cleveland alive because that is what elite playoff guards do. He attacked the rim, hit tough floaters, and created shots even when the spacing was not perfect. But the Knicks made sure every Cleveland basket required effort, while their own offense began to feel more connected. By the time New York started finding Hart and rhythm, the game had changed. Cleveland was no longer dictating terms. They were reacting. And in the playoffs, reacting is dangerous, because one step late becomes one open three, one missed rotation becomes one run, and one bad possession becomes a building shaking around you. The Cavaliers were still close enough to fight, But the Knicks had already found something more powerful than a lead. They had found belief. The third quarter was where the game stopped feeling like a contest of talent and started feeling like a test of identity. Cleveland had the pieces to answer. They had Mitchell's shot creation, Mobley's length, Allen's rebounding, and enough shooters around them to stretch New York's defense. But the Knicks kept forcing the Cavaliers into uncomfortable possessions. Nothing came clean. Nothing came easy. Every Cleveland drive was met with bodies. Every kick-out pass arrived with a defender closing hard. Every missed jumper gave New York a chance to run, and that is where Josh Hart became more than a role player. He became the engine. Hart's value was not just in the box score. It was in the way he changed the tempo of the game. When Cleveland missed, Hart was already moving. When the ball hit the floor, Hart was first to it. When the Cavaliers hesitated on the perimeter, Hart punished them with confidence. His three-point shooting became the surprise weapon, but his energy was the real damage. The Cavaliers had clearly built parts of their defensive plan around slowing Brunson. They wanted to show him size, bodies, and different matchups. And for stretches, it worked. Brunson was not lighting up the scoreboard early. But the hidden danger of focusing too much on Brunson is that New York has enough connective players to beat you from the sides. That was the tactical trap. When Cleveland shaded toward Brunson, Hart found space. When they worried about Towns, Anunoby got clean looks. When they tried to protect the paint, Bridges attacked the middle. The Knicks were not playing beautiful basketball every trip, but they were playing connected basketball. And in the playoffs, connected basketball can be more dangerous than beautiful basketball. Cleveland's bench became another turning point. The missed threes were not just misses. They were lost chances to slow the crowd. Sam Merrill's struggles mattered because Cleveland needed one reliable spark outside of Mitchell. When role players hesitate in a playoff road environment, the entire offense tightens. Shots come a half-second late, passes get safer, drives become crowded. New York sensed that hesitation and attacked it. The Knicks' third-quarter surge was not built on one miracle sequence. It was built possession by possession, a Hart three, a Towns touch, a defensive stop, a rebound, a Brunson pass, another Cleveland miss, another Garden roar. Suddenly, the Cavaliers were not only chasing points, they were chasing emotional control. That is the hardest thing to regain on the road. Mitchell kept trying to pull Cleveland back with floaters, drives, and tough jumpers. But New York's pressure kept making the gap feel bigger than the scoreboard. The Knicks were winning the physical battle, the emotional battle, and the rhythm battle all at once. By the end of that stretch, Cleveland still had time, but New York had control. Chapter 4 begins with one uncomfortable truth for Cleveland. They were not losing because they lacked talent. They were losing because the Knicks were forcing them to play under emotional pressure for too long. That is a different kind of playoff problem. Talent can answer a run. Talent can create a tough shot. Talent can survive a bad possession. But when the building is shaking, when the whistles feel heavy, when free throws start missing, and when every Knicks role player begins to believe the night belongs to him, talent alone is not enough. Cleveland needed calm execution. Instead, they kept drifting between good ideas and rushed decision. Their best moments came when Mitchell attacked with balance and when Mobley was used as more than a stationary big. Mobley's ability to face up, drive, and finish through contact gave the Cavaliers a real pressure point against New York's defense. Allen's offensive rebounding also kept several possessions alive, especially when Cleveland's perimeter shots refused to fall. But the Cavaliers could not turn those advantages into control. New York's defense deserves credit for that. Anunoby's activity disrupted passing lanes. Bridges used his length to bother ball handlers and recover into contests. Hart crashed down to help, then sprinted back out to shooters. Towns, often judged mainly for offense, gave New York important defensive possessions by holding position and challenging without completely breaking the structure. This was not a perfect Knicks defensive game, but it was a committed one. And commitment matters in the playoffs. For the Cavaliers, the most damaging pattern was how often they had to work hard just to get an average shot, while New York kept finding momentum shots. A Hart corner three, a Bridges floater, a Towns finish, an Anunoby three after the ball changed sides. Those are the kinds of plays that do more than add points. They tell the opponent, you solved one problem, but here comes another. That is why Brunson's quiet control was so important. He did not need to force his way into the game. He let Cleveland's defensive attention become New York's advantage. By drawing eyes, shifting bodies, and trusting teammates, Brunson allowed the Knicks to play with layers. Cleveland, meanwhile, leaned heavily on Mitchell to create oxygen. He answered with toughness, but too many possessions became difficult late clock situations. That is where playoff games often tilt, not on the highlight everyone remembers, but on the repeated small failures that drain a team. Missed free throws, late rotations, poor spacing, empty bench possessions, and second chances surrendered. New York kept collecting those little wins until they became something bigger. They became separation. The fifth chapter of this game belonged to the margins, the small things that casual viewers might miss, but the kind of details that decide playoff series. Cleveland did not collapse all at once. That is what made this so painful for them. They had enough moments to believe they were still right there. Mitchell kept putting pressure on the rim. Mobley continued to show why his ceiling is so dangerous. Allen battled through traffic, fought for rebounds, and gave the Cavaliers extra possessions when their offense needed rescuing. But the Knicks kept winning the hidden scoreboard. They won it with effort. They won it with spacing. They won it with trust. Most importantly, they won it with timing. Whenever Cleveland seemed ready to cut into the lead and make the Garden nervous, New York found one answer. Sometimes it was Josh Hart stepping into another fearless three. Sometimes it was Towns using his size and touch to punish a mismatch. Sometimes it was Bridges calmly finishing a possession that looked broken. Sometimes it was Anunoby making a defensive play that never shows up as loudly as a dunk, but changes the entire rhythm of the next minute. That is what great playoff teams do. They do not need every possession to look perfect. They just need enough players making winning plays at the right time. Cleveland's problem was that their mistakes were too expensive. A missed free throw did not stay just a missed free throw. It became a louder crowd. A missed open three did not stay just a missed shot. It became a Knicks fast break. A late defensive rotation did not stay just one breakdown. It became another reminder that New York was reading the floor faster. The Cavaliers were also fighting the psychological weight of Game 1. Even if they did not look broken early, the memory of that comeback still lived inside the building. The Knicks knew it. Their fans knew it, and every New York run seemed to ask Cleveland the same question. Can you really survive this again? That is why Josh Hart's performance mattered so much. He was not just scoring points. He was putting doubt into Cleveland's defense. When a player like Hart starts hitting shots, rebounding through contact, attacking in transition, and feeding off the crowd, the opponent's game plan starts to bend. Suddenly, the Cavaliers could not simply load up on Brunson. They could not ignore the corners. They could not relax on the glass. New York made Cleveland guard everything. And when a team has to guard everything under playoff pressure, fatigue becomes a decision maker. The legs get heavier. The closeouts get slower. The mind starts racing. That is where the Knicks took control, not with one knockout punch, but with a series of body blows that Cleveland could feel possession after possession. The Cavaliers were still alive, but the Knicks were making them pay for every breath. By the time the game reached its most dangerous stretch, Cleveland was no longer just battling the Knicks. They were battling the scoreboard, the crowd, the clock, and their own mistakes. That is when playoff basketball becomes cruel. The Cavaliers had already shown enough to prove they belonged in the fight. Mitchell continued to attack with force, using his first step to bend the defense and his touch to finish over length. Mobley gave Cleveland versatility, stepping outside, putting the ball on the floor, and challenging smaller defenders. Allen kept fighting in the paint, refusing to let New York own every rebound without resistance. But New York had the cleaner identity. The Knicks knew exactly where their energy was coming from. Hart was pushing the pace and punishing space. Brunson was controlling matchups even when he was not scoring in waves. Towns was stretching Cleveland's defense and giving New York another offensive release valve. Anunoby and Bridges were bringing length, discipline, and timely shot-making on both ends. Cleveland's identity was harder to see. Were they trying to play through Mitchell's creation? Were they trying to attack inside with Mobley and Allen? Were they trying to win with spacing around the stars? The answer was yes to all of it. But in the playoffs, too many half-clear answers can become a problem. New York looked connected. Cleveland looked like it was searching. That difference showed up in the pressure moments. When the Cavaliers trapped Brunson, the Knicks found the next pass. When Cleveland helped off Hart, he stepped into rhythm. When they shaded toward Towns, someone else slipped into open space. The Knicks were not just reacting to Cleveland's defense, they were manipulating it. That is what made this game so impressive from New York's side. They did not need Brunson to dominate every possession. They trusted the system around him. They trusted Hart to shoot. They trusted Towns to attack. They trusted Bridges to finish tough plays. They trusted Anunoby to make the kind of winning decisions that do not always become viral highlights, but absolutely decide postseason games. Cleveland, meanwhile, kept leaving points behind. Missed free throws became a major wound. Empty possessions from role players made Mitchell's job heavier. And when the bench could not deliver enough offense, the Cavaliers had to ask their stars to create against a defense that was already gaining confidence. That is a dangerous cycle, because once New York smelled hesitation, they pushed harder. The Garden crowd rose with every Hart rebound, every defensive stand, every open three, every moment when Cleveland looked one pass late, and slowly, the game began to feel less like Cleveland was chasing a comeback and more like New York was testing how much pressure the Cavaliers could survive. For a team trying to recover from a painful Game 1, that pressure was enormous, and the Knicks never let them breathe. The seventh chapter of this game was about pressure turning into proof. New York had built the lead, but playoff leads are never safe when Donovan Mitchell is on the other side. Cleveland still had enough shot-making, enough athleticism, and enough urgency to make one serious push. And for a moment, that push began to appear. Mitchell found space, attacked the lane, and reminded everyone that he can change the rhythm of a game in less than 2 minutes. But the Knicks did not blink. That was the most important sign of their growth. In past versions of New York basketball, a run from the opponent could create panic. The ball might stick. The offense might shrink. The crowd might turn nervous. But this team stayed composed. Brunson slowed the game down when it needed control. Hart kept attacking the glass like every rebound was personal. Bridges stayed ready in the gaps. Towns gave the Knicks a scoring option that Cleveland could not ignore. And Anunoby continued to be the quiet connector. His impact was not always loud, but it was everywhere. A strong closeout, a smart rotation, a timely three, a drive into space, a defensive possession where he made Cleveland restart the offense with fewer seconds on the clock. Those plays do not always become the headline, but coaches know their value. They are the possessions that hold a lead together. Cleveland's problem was that every comeback attempt required perfection. They had to defend without fouling. They had to rebound without losing heart. They had to make free throws. They had to hit open threes. They had to keep Mitchell involved without becoming predictable. That is a difficult formula on the road, especially when the Knicks are forcing the crowd into every possession. The Cavaliers kept searching for that one clean run, but New York kept breaking it before it could fully breathe. A Hart hustle play here, a Towns touch there, a Brunson decision at the right moment, a Bridges bucket when the shot clock was bleeding down. The Knicks were not just protecting a lead, they were managing the emotional flow of the game. That is championship-level maturity, even if the team still has more to prove. For Cleveland, the lesson was painful. You cannot depend only on your stars to rescue you after the game is already tilted. Role players have to make shots. Bigs have to finish free throws. Defenders have to communicate before the screen arrives, not after the mismatch is already created. New York understood that earlier. They played with five-man trust, and Cleveland played too many possessions like a team searching for a perfect answer. In the playoffs, the perfect answer rarely comes. The tougher team creates one. The eighth chapter was where New York's depth stopped being a supporting detail and became the main difference between control and survival. Cleveland had already spent too much energy trying to stabilize the game. Mitchell had to create through contact. Mobley had to fight for space against a defense that kept shrinking the floor. Allen had to battle for rebounds in traffic. Harden had to hit difficult shots just to keep the Cavaliers within striking distance. Every Cleveland answer felt expensive. New York's answers felt more natural. That was the separation. When Brunson drew attention, the next pass was ready. When Towns touched the ball, Cleveland had to respect both the jumper and the drive. When Bridges found a pocket of space, he did not rush. When Anunoby stepped into a shot, the Garden believed before the ball even left his hands. And when Hart got loose, the entire rhythm of the game changed. Hart was the emotional blade of the night. He cut into Cleveland with hustle first, then with confidence. His rebounds gave New York extra life. His transition attacks forced the Cavaliers to sprint backward instead of setting their defense. His threes punished every moment of disrespect. By the time Cleveland adjusted, Hart was no longer just open, he was empowered. That is a dangerous thing in the playoffs, because when a role player starts playing with star-level belief, the opponent has to rewrite the scouting report in real time. Cleveland could not simply say, "Let Hart shoot." Not anymore. They could not overhelp off him. They could not lose him in transition. They could not allow him to turn broken plays into momentum plays. The Knicks had transformed a secondary option into a primary pressure point. Meanwhile, the Cavaliers' supporting cast could not match that energy consistently. Their missed threes hurt, their bench struggles hurt, their missed free throws hurt even more because those are the points that stop runs, quiet buildings, and restore breathing room. Instead, Cleveland kept giving New York opportunities to stay loud. That was the emotional math of the game. Every Knicks make multiplied the noise. Every Cavs miss multiplied the doubt. Every loose ball Hart grab felt like proof that New York was a step faster and a little more connected. The Cavaliers still had talent. They still had pride. They still had Mitchell. And that means no game is truly dead until the clock says so. But by this point, New York had forced Cleveland into the worst possible position on the road. needing perfect offense against a team playing with total belief. And in Madison Square Garden, belief can feel like an extra defender. By the 9th chapter, the game had become less about whether Cleveland could make a run and more about whether New York would allow the door to open. The Cavaliers tried. That part cannot be ignored. Mitchell kept attacking with the stubbornness of a true playoff star. He drove into traffic, created floaters, absorbed contact, and kept looking for the possession that could flip the energy. Mobley continued giving Cleveland flashes of two-way impact, and Allen refused to stop fighting around the rim. Harden found moments from deep that gave the Cavs a little oxygen. But oxygen is not the same as control. New York controlled the emotional center of the game. That is why every Cleveland push felt temporary. The Cavaliers could cut into the lead, but they could not fully change the feeling of the night. The Knicks always had one more stabilizing play. Brunson would make the right read. Hart would chase down another rebound. Bridges would hit a difficult shot. Towns would punish a mismatch. Anunoby would step into a clean three or force Cleveland into another uncomfortable possession. That balance broke Cleveland's rhythm. The Cavaliers needed their role players to relieve pressure, but instead the pressure kept returning to Mitchell. That is not sustainable against a defense that can load up, recover, and force tough late clock looks. When a team becomes too dependent on one creator, even a great creator, the opponent begins to predict the emotional shape of every possession. New York did not have that problem. Their offense had multiple personalities. It could be Brunson in control, it could be Towns stretching the floor, it could be Hart attacking with pure force, it could be Bridges finding the soft spot, it could be Anunoby turning defense into momentum. That variety kept Cleveland from settling into one clean coverage. And then there was the crowd. Madison Square Garden did not simply react to the game. It became part of the game. Every Hart three sounded bigger than 3 points. Every missed Cleveland free throw felt like a warning. Every Knicks stop pushed the Cavaliers deeper into pressure. By the final stretch, New York was no longer just protecting a lead. They were closing a statement. For Cleveland, the film will be painful. Not because they were completely outclassed, but because the mistakes were clear. Missed free throws, missed open looks, slow rotations, inconsistent bench production, too many possessions where the ball stopped and the pressure grew. The Knicks were sharper in the moments that mattered, and that is why Game 2 became more than a win. It became evidence that New York's toughness is not just emotion, it is structure, trust, and execution under fire. The final chapter of this game is not only about New York taking a 2-0 lead. It is about what this matchup revealed under pressure. The Knicks proved that playoff basketball is not won by one star alone, it is won by layers. Jalen Brunson did not need to carry every possession with scoring because he trusted the structure around him. Josh Hart became the emotional force of the night, turning hustle into offense and confidence into punishment. Karl Anthony Towns gave New York spacing and size. OG Anunoby gave them defense, balance, and timely shot-making. Mikal Bridges gave them calm when the possession got messy. That is the lesson for New York. When the ball moves, when the floor stays spaced, and when every player accepts his role with force, they become extremely difficult to break. For Cleveland, the lesson is just as clear. Donovan Mitchell can keep them alive, but he cannot be the entire solution. Evan Mobley must continue attacking with confidence. Jarrett Allen has to finish possessions and punish the glass. Harden and the supporting shooters must make New York pay when the defense collapses. Most importantly, the Cavaliers must clean up the free throws, the late rotations, and the moments where hesitation turns into momentum for the opponent. Strategically, Cleveland has to make Game 3 more organized. They need earlier actions from Mobley, cleaner spacing around Mitchell, and stronger weak-side discipline when Brunson draws attention. They cannot allow Hart to roam freely into rebounds and rhythm threes. They must force the Knicks to win through contested half-court execution, not emotional waves powered by the crowd. For New York, the challenge is maturity. A 2-0 lead is powerful, but it is not a finish line. The Knicks must carry the same discipline on the road, where the crowd will not rescue empty possessions and Cleveland will play with urgency. The best teams do not relax after a statement. They sharpen, and beyond the tactics, this game gives a bigger reminder. Pressure reveals character. Some players shrink from it, some players survive it, and some, like Josh Hart tonight, transform it into something unforgettable. Basketball at its best is not just about winning. It is about trust, resilience, sacrifice, and the ability to stay together when the moment gets heavy. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with another NBA fan. Comment where you are watching from. Press 1 if you believe the Knicks are built for a deep playoff run. Press 2 if you believe Cleveland will answer back in Game 3. This series is not finished. It has only become more serious.